The monster beneath the mask. Why Rin Itoshi's destroyer mode is his true self. There is one moment in Blue Lock that completely changes how we should understand Rin Itoshi. Not because he scores a spectacular goal, not because he defeats an incredible opponent, but because, for the first time in years, the mask slips. The calm strategist disappears. The elegant puppet master vanishes. His movements become savage. His eyes become wild. He sticks out his tongue. He charges forward like a predator that has finally escaped its cage. Many readers describe this transformation as Rin losing his mind, but what if the exact opposite is happening? What if the cold, calculating Rin isn't the real Rin at all? What if the true Rin is the terrifying figure hidden underneath years of emotional suppression? Because psychologically, people do not always reveal their true selves when they are calm. Sometimes, they reveal themselves when they finally stop suppressing everything they have been taught to hide. The mask of perfection. To understand destroyer mode, we first have to understand the mask Rin has worn since childhood. After Sei shattered his world, Rin made an unconscious decision: never be vulnerable again, never depend on anyone again, never lose control again. That decision didn't just change how he thought, it changed who he allowed himself to become. Psychologist Carl Jung introduced the idea of the persona, the social mask people create to survive. A persona isn't necessarily fake, it serves an important purpose. It protects us, it helps us function, it allows us to adapt. But there is a danger. If you wear the mask for too long, you begin believing the mask is your identity. That is exactly what happened to Rin, the emotionless genius, the perfect strategist, the player who predicts every movement. These traits helped him survive, but survival is not the same as living. The persona kept him safe, it also kept him imprisoned. The shadow he buried. If the persona is the mask, then Jung believed every human being also possesses a shadow. The shadow contains everything we reject about ourselves: our anger, our fear, our instincts, our vulnerability, our aggression. The more someone suppresses these qualities, the stronger the shadow becomes. Most people assume Rin's anger defines him. Ironically, he suppresses far more anger than he expresses. His calm demeanor isn't the absence of rage, it's the containment of it. Every insult, every disappointment, every memory of Sei, every feeling of abandonment, every ounce of grief, he locks it away for years, and eventually, pressure creates an explosion. Destroyer mode isn't the creation of a monster, it's the release of one that has always existed. Why his football suddenly becomes ugly. One of the most striking changes during Destroyer mode is how dramatically Rin's style evolves. Normally, his football is elegant. Every pass is calculated, every movement is efficient, everything unfolds according to plan. Then suddenly, everything changes. His movements become awkward, violent, chaotic. He attacks impossible angles. He challenges opponents directly. He doesn't simply outplay them, he dismantles them. Why? Because the objective changes. The puppet master wants control. The destroyer wants domination. Those are completely different psychological goals. Control seeks safety. Domination seeks expression. When Rin enters this state, he stops trying to predict the game. Instead, he imposes himself upon it. For the first time, he isn't reacting to uncertainty. He becomes the uncertainty, destroying weapons, not players. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Destroyer mode is what Rin actually targets. Notice that he doesn't merely defeat opponents. He destroys the very thing that makes them special. Against skilled dribblers, he crushes their confidence in dribbling. Against powerful shooters, he denies their finishing. Against tactical players, he dismantles their intelligence. This isn't accidental. Psychologically, Rin attacks identity. Why? Because someone once attacked his. When Sei abandoned their shared dream, he didn't simply reject Rin. From Rin's perspective, he rejected everything Rin believed himself to be. His dream, his purpose, his future, his identity. Without realizing it, Rin begins repeating that same pattern. If he cannot erase the pain of having his identity shattered, he will become the one who shatters everyone else's. This is one of trauma's cruelest cycles. The wounded often recreate the emotional injuries they never healed from, not because they enjoy causing pain, but because pain has become the only language they fully understand. The freedom of instinct. For years, Rin believed intelligence was the key to victory. Calculate more, predict more, control more. But flow demands something entirely different. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described flow as a state in which conscious thought fades away, allowing action to emerge almost instinctively. True flow isn't overthinking, it's complete immersion. That creates a fascinating contradiction. Rin's normal style depends on constant conscious control. Destroyer mode depends on surrender, not surrender to defeat, surrender to instinct. The very thing he spent years suppressing becomes his greatest strength. It's almost poetic. The answer he was searching for through control could only be found by letting go. Why he sticks out his tongue. One of the most unsettling visual details of Destroyer mode is Rin's expression. His tongue hangs out, his face twists into something almost feral. Many fans interpret this as insanity, but body language tells another story. Across sports, combat, and even childhood play, intense physical engagement often strips away socially acceptable expressions. Athletes grimace, fighters roar, children laugh without restraint. These moments aren't carefully managed, they are instinctive. Rin's expression symbolizes the collapse of emotional repression. The polished image disappears. What remains is raw, unfiltered instinct. It looks frightening because we've become accustomed to seeing him emotionally frozen. In reality, this may be the healthiest expression we've ever seen from him. Not because it's gentle, but because it's honest. For perhaps the first time since childhood, Rin stops performing the role of the perfect prodigy. He simply exists. Why Isagi awakens? This version of Rin. There is a reason Destroyer mode emerges when Rin faces Yoichi Isagi. It isn't because Isagi is merely strong, it's because Isagi refuses to behave predictably. The puppet master depends upon certainty. He needs patterns, probabilities, control. Isagi destroys those assumptions by constantly evolving. Every time Rin believes he understands him, Isagi changes. Psychologically, Isagi forces Rin into territory where calculation alone is no longer enough. To survive, Rin has to abandon the persona he spent years constructing. Ironically, the rival he initially dismissed becomes the catalyst for his liberation, not because Isagi teaches him anything directly, but because he creates conditions where Rin's authentic self can no longer remain hidden. Destroyer mode isn't the birth of a monster, it's the return of a child who was forced to bury his emotions beneath perfection. For years, Rin believed strength meant control. He believed intelligence meant suppressing instinct. He believed freedom meant defeating Sei. Yet every step forward brought him closer to a profound realization. The strongest version of himself wasn't the one who controlled everything, it was the one who finally stopped pretending. His terrifying smile, his relentless attacks, his wild movements aren't signs that Rin has become less human. They are signs that, after years of living behind a mask, he has finally allowed himself to feel. But this creates an even greater question. If Destroyer mode reveals Rin's true nature, why does he still struggle against Isagi? Why does someone with such overwhelming talent continue to lose the battles that matter most? Because football isn't decided by talent alone, it's decided by ego. The two egos. Why Rin Itoshi keeps losing to Isagi despite being more talented. If you asked most Blue Lock fans one simple question, who is the better football player? Many would answer Rin Itoshi. He's faster, more technically gifted, physically superior. His shooting range is extraordinary. His football IQ borders on inhuman. On paper, Rin should win. And yet, again and again, the story refuses to let him completely surpass Yoichi Isagi. This frustrates some readers. They argue that Rin is simply better. So why does Isagi keep becoming the center of Blue Lock's evolution? The answer has very little to do with football. It has everything to do with psychology. Because Blue Lock was never just about creating the strongest striker. It is an experiment designed to answer one question. What kind of ego creates true greatness? And when Rin and Isagi stand on opposite sides of the field, they aren't just competing as players. They represent two completely different philosophies of human growth. External ego versus internal ego. At first glance, both Rin and Isagi seem incredibly egoistic. Both want to become the world's best striker. Both refuse to settle for mediocrity. Both obsess over improvement. But underneath those similarities lies one crucial difference. Rin's ego is external, Isagi's ego is internal. An external ego defines itself through comparison. I am better than him. I must defeat that person. My value depends on surpassing someone else. An internal ego asks a different question. How much stronger can I become? What is my next evolution? Who can I become tomorrow? The destination might appear identical, but the journey is completely different. One person chases another, the other chases their own potential. That distinction changes everything. Why Isagi evolves faster. One of Isagi's greatest strengths isn't intelligence, it isn't vision, it isn't even adaptability, it's humility. Most people misunderstand humility. They think it means lacking confidence. In reality, humility is the willingness to admit your current self is incomplete. Every match, Isagi destroys his own understanding of football. He willingly abandons old beliefs. He constantly asks, what if I'm wrong? That question is incredibly powerful, because every time he accepts being wrong, he creates space to become right. Rin almost never does this. His identity depends on being superior. If your identity depends on superiority, then admitting weakness feels psychologically dangerous. Instead of changing his worldview, Rin often tries to force reality back into his existing framework. Isagi changes himself. Rin tries to change the world. One strategy creates evolution, the other creates resistance. Adaptability versus mastery. There is another fascinating contrast. Rin pursues mastery, Isagi pursues adaptation. Mastery is about becoming exceptionally good at one way of solving problems. Adaptation is about inventing entirely new ways of solving them. History shows us something remarkable. The strongest species rarely survive, the most adaptable do. The same principle applies in Blue Lock. Every time football changes, Isagi changes with it. Every unexpected situation becomes an opportunity. Rin initially views unexpected situations as obstacles to eliminate. This connects directly to the trauma we explored earlier. Remember, control makes Rin feel safe. Chaos reminds him of abandonment. Isagi experiences chaos differently. Chaos excites him. Where Rin sees danger, Isagi sees possibility. That psychological difference allows Isagi to continue evolving even when everyone else reaches their limits. When people compare Rin, Itoshi, and Isagi, they usually compare goals, statistics, skills, or victories. But those aren't the most important differences. The true difference lies in the stories they tell themselves. Rin says, "I exist to surpass someone else." Isagi says, "I exist to become someone greater than I was yesterday." One story depends on another person. The other creates limitless evolution. That is why Isagi keeps growing. That is why Rin keeps struggling. Not because he lacks ability, but because he still hasn't answered the simplest and hardest question of all. Who is Rin Itoshi when no one is left to defeat? And that question leads us to the final chapter of his journey. Because Rin Itoshi isn't just one of Blue Lock's greatest players, he is one of its greatest tragedies. There is a quote often attributed to the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche: "He who fights with monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." They capture the tragedy of his journey. As children, Rin and Sae Itoshi dreamed of conquering the world together. Years later, one brother became emotionally distant. The other became emotionally imprisoned. One abandoned the dream, the other abandoned himself. From the outside, Rin looks like the perfect competitor, disciplined, focused, relentless. But beneath that extraordinary talent is a painful irony. The harder Rin chased revenge, the further he drifted from the person he could have become. His greatest opponent was never Sei. It was never Yoichi Isagi. It was the version of himself that refused to let go of the past. What Rin must learn. If Rin is ever going to become truly free, his next evolution won't be physical, it won't even be tactical, it will be existential. He must answer questions no amount of training can solve. Who am I if I stop chasing Sei? Who am I if no one is watching? Why do I love football? What does victory mean to me? Notice that none of these questions mention another person. For perhaps the first time in his life, Rin must become the author of his own story. That is the final stage of individuation, not rejecting your past, not pretending your wounds never happened, but refusing to let them dictate your future. The hidden lesson of Blue Lock. Many viewers believe Blue Lock is a story about ego. It is, but not in the way most people think. The series doesn't celebrate selfishness for its own sake. It celebrates ownership, owning your choices, owning your ambition, owning your identity. Rin's ego was powerful, but it wasn't entirely his. Too much of it belonged to Sei. Isagi's ego grows because every evolution belongs to Isagi himself. That is why his growth feels limitless. Blue Lock argues that the world's greatest striker cannot merely possess incredible talent. He must possess an ego that no one else controls. Until Rin reaches that point, his football will always carry invisible chains. The boy who mistook control for freedom. He controlled everyone except himself. He predicted every movement except his own emotional patterns. He escaped every defender except the memory of his childhood. His greatest prison was never created by Sei. Sei opened the door, but Rin chose to remain inside, not because he was weak, not because he lacked courage, but because pain had become familiar, and familiarity often feels safer than freedom. The tragedy of Rin Itoshi is not that he was abandoned, it is that he spent years believing abandonment defined him. Yet Blue Lock also offers hope. Every match forces him to confront himself. Every rivalry pushes him beyond old limits. Every failure chips away at the identity he built from revenge. Slowly, painfully, he is being forced to ask a question he has avoided since childhood. Who is Rin Itoshi when he no longer needs Sei's approval? The day he finds that answer, he won't simply become a better striker, he will finally become free. Rin Itoshi is often remembered as Blue Lock's cold genius, the emotionless prodigy, the ultimate rival. But beneath the icy stare, beneath the perfect technique, beneath the terrifying destroyer mode is something much more heartbreaking. A little brother who never truly stopped waiting, waiting to be understood, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to hear that he was enough. And perhaps that is why Rin remains one of the most compelling characters in Blue Lock. because his greatest battle was never against another striker. It was never against Sei. It was never against Isagi. His greatest battle has always been against the version of himself that believed his worth depended on someone else's approval. And if there's one lesson Rin's story leaves us with, it's this. The strongest ego is not the one that defeats everyone else. It is the one that no longer needs someone else to decide its value. Because the moment your identity belongs entirely to you, no rival, no defeat, no rejection can ever truly take it away. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe.